My name is Ava Linwood. I was 17 when my own parents told a crowded hallway full of teachers and students that my sister Lee had real potential, while I should just manage. 6 years later, I walked into the boardroom of the same tech firm Lee worked for and fired her in front of the entire executive team. Let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, this story is for you. Now, here's how it all began. It happened on a Wednesday. The kind of cold, rainy spring day where the school building smells like wet sneakers and copy paper. I was standing outside Mr. Carter's classroom, pretending to scroll my phone, but I was really just trying not to shake. I could already hear their voices from down the hall. My mom's clipped tone, my dad's booming irritation, and Lee's practiced little chuckle. I knew what was coming before the door even opened. Parent-teacher meeting number 4 this semester. Not because I was failing, because they thought I was wasting time. Ava's drifting, my mom liked to say. She's not serious. Lee's always had direction. And today would be no different. When the door swung open, I tucked my phone into my hoodie pocket and walked in like I wasn't walking to the gallows. They barely acknowledged me. Just a quick nod from Mom before she turned back to Ms. Ralston, my guidance counselor. "I'm just going to say it plainly," Dad said, leaning forward across the table like a man negotiating a car deal, not his daughter's future. "We're paying for Lee's college because she has real potential. We can't waste money. Ava will manage." He said it like manage meant something noble or even survivable, like I was some B-list background character in the family movie who didn't need a plotline of her own. The words didn't feel real at first. They just hung in the air, echoing between the wall posters of community colleges and financial aid tips, until someone behind me snorted, one of the other students waiting for their turn. I didn't turn around, I didn't breathe. Lee, sitting with one perfectly crossed leg and freshly curled hair, looked up and smiled at me. "Don't worry, sis," she said sweetly. "Not everyone's cut out for more." I think I actually stopped breathing for a second, not from shock because I wasn't shocked, just tired, so tired, of being the shadow. I didn't say a word, not then. I just turned and walked out of the room, through the hall buzzing with after-lunch noise, my face hot and my hands clenched so tight they ached. I kept walking until I reached the counselor's office. Ms. Ralston followed a few minutes later, gently closing the door behind her. She didn't ask what was wrong. She didn't need to. I sat down across from her, pulled my sleeves over my knuckles, and stared at the floor. "Ava," she began gently, "they shouldn't have said that, I'm sorry." I nodded once. Then quietly, like I was whispering to the version of myself I hadn't met yet, the one who'd rise from this, I said under my breath, "I'll show them who's going to manage." And I meant it. After that meeting, something in me shut down. Not the sad kind of shutdown, the survival kind. At school, I went quiet. I stopped trying to explain myself to teachers or correct my parents when they forgot I was taking AP classes too. If they wanted me invisible, fine. I'd disappear, but on my terms. It started 2 nights after the meeting. I waited until the house went still, past the time Lee finished her 3rd call of the night giggling about her marketing internship that hadn't even started yet, past Mom's habitual vacuuming of the already clean living room, and Dad's evening news at full volume. In the glow of my tiny desk lamp, I opened my laptop and typed, "Learn Python free." I didn't even know what I was looking for at first, just something that wasn't about pleasing anyone else. Something powerful, something mine. I found a free intro course from MIT. Then a few crash tutorials on YouTube. By midnight, I was enrolled in 3 different online modules, had installed my first code editor, and scribbled out a handwritten schedule in my notebook, color-coded naturally. "If no one invests in me," I whispered, barely audible over the soft hum of my fan, "I'll invest in myself." That summer, I stopped going out unless I had to. No mall trips with classmates. No family movie nights, not that they ever noticed. I coded, I debugged, I rewrote. I failed my first few scripts so badly I almost threw my laptop out the window. But I didn't. I gave myself 2 hours a night minimum, sometimes 4. On weekends, I'd wake up before the rest of the house and sneak in extra time before chores. My parents assumed I was doing homework, probably remedial. Lee never asked. She was too busy preparing for her big girl internship, as Mom called it. At dinner, it was always the same routine. "Lee got her first project assignment already," Mom beamed, passing the salad bowl. "Her supervisor says she's got real leadership potential." Dad chimed in with a proud grin. That's our girl. Maybe she'll be running the agency in 5 years. I'd nod, fork in hand, chewing slowly to keep from screaming. You don't talk much these days, Ava, Mom observed one night, not even looking at me. Everything okay at school? I shrugged, eyes on my plate. Fine. Just once, I considered blurting it all out, telling them I'd built a chatbot that actually passed my chemistry teacher's extra credit quiz, that I'd reverse-engineered a local bakery's website backend just for practice, that I'd submitted an early application to Caltech on a whim with a portfolio of mini projects I coded in secret. But I didn't say a word, because I already knew the look they'd give me, vaguely polite confusion, the kind adults give when they can't quite connect what you're saying to anything they value. And worse, Lee's smirk. That smug, sideways glance she wore like lipstick. So I waited. Every night, I folded the edges of my progress a little tighter, like origami no one would ever see. And then, one morning in late July, it came. The envelope was thin, stark, official. I knew before I even opened it. Congratulations, Ava Linwood. You've been awarded a full merit scholarship to Caltech's Department of Computing and Mathematical Sciences. No one else was home. Lee was at her unpaid internship, where she mostly posted on Instagram about iced coffee and the grind. My parents had taken the day to help her pick out networking outfits. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the letter like it might vanish if I blinked. I didn't cry. I didn't jump up and down. I just smiled, slowly, quietly, for the first time in months. Then I folded the letter neatly, slipped it into the back of a geometry workbook no one would ever check, and returned to my laptop. There was more to build. My summer passed that way, in silence, in code, in stolen hours while the rest of the house celebrated Lee's every move like it was a presidential campaign. They didn't ask where I was going to college, not once. And when I overheard Mom telling Aunt Doreen at a barbecue, Ava will probably take a gap year or something, she's still figuring things out, I just smiled into my lemonade, because I already had the ticket out, and it was paid in full. 3 years passed in a blur of algorithms, long nights, and learning how to be exactly who I said I would become. It's funny, you'd think the moment you graduate college with honors, one of the top 10 in your class from Caltech, no less, your parents would at least ask what day the ceremony is. They didn't. The morning I walked across that stage in my cap and gown, my name was printed neatly in the program. Ava Linwood, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, Departmental Honors. My advisor gave me a handshake that lingered an extra beat, and I left the auditorium with a diploma in one hand and a recruiter's business card tucked under my laptop sleeve from a firm I hadn't even applied to. But my family didn't know. They didn't ask. And I didn't tell them. Instead, I celebrated with Cam. Cam was my roommate for the last 2 years. She's a graphic designer with a sharp tongue and a soft heart. The kind of person who could make you laugh in the middle of a breakdown and mean it. We were sitting at our usual cafe off campus. A mismatched, plant-filled hole in the wall that brewed espresso like it was a love language. I had just taken the first sip of my coffee when Cam said, without even looking up from her sketchpad, "So, do you want to send the diploma to your parents with a glitter bomb, or just frame it quietly in your future skyscraper office?" I snorted. Honestly, I don't think they'd even notice the glitter. They're too busy celebrating Lee's new job. Cam raised an eyebrow. Oh, the one where she posts daily about hustle culture but hasn't coded a single thing. I slid my phone across the table. A new Facebook post from my mom. So proud of our Lee starting her journey as a future tech leader. Couldn't be more thrilled. First steps into the real world. Boss babe, women in tech, proud mama, no mention of me. Not even a congrats to both our girls this year. Cam handed the phone back without comment. They'll figure it out soon enough, I said, sipping again. She looked up finally, really looking. And when they do, I smiled, slow and sure. That's when it gets interesting. Outside, the sun caught the edges of my tassel, still pinned to the corner of my bag. Inside, I felt something shift. Not anger, not even sadness anymore, just peace. The kind you get when you know who you are and who you're no longer waiting for. We spent the rest of the morning people watching and talking about what's next. Cam had a freelance gig lined up with a boutique agency. I had 4 recruiters in my inbox, 2 interviews scheduled, and 1 big idea scribbled in the back of my notebook that I hadn't dared say out loud yet. That idea would change everything. But not today. Today was about closing one chapter. quietly, on my own terms. When we left the cafe, I caught my reflection in the window, taller somehow, not in height but in presence. Like the version of me who sat in that high school counselor's office with trembling hands had grown into someone solid. I didn't need to announce it to the world. Not yet. Because soon the world would come knocking on my door and it wouldn't ask for Lee. The first time I heard the notification ping, I didn't think much of it. Then it came again. And again. And again. By the time I checked the dashboard, I had to blink twice to make sure I wasn't seeing things. 10,452 downloads. In 6 days. I just sat there for a second, in the middle of the crowded coworking space downtown, with my fingers still hovering above the keys and my breath lodged somewhere between disbelief and hysteria. It was working. My app was working. Hey Ava, Jorge, one of the developers I'd recruited from an online forum, leaned over from the desk beside me. Is this number real? I turned my laptop so he could see it himself. He blinked. Holy, that's not just real, that's viral. A second later, Shilpa spun around in her chair, eyes wide. Did we hit 5 digits already? I didn't say anything, I just nodded once. And then the room, our little rented sliver of a startup incubator in Soma, erupted into cheers. Jorge high-fived Shilpa. The intern Miles fist-pumped into the air. Someone brought over cold brew and paper cups, like we were ringing a victory bell with caffeine. None of them knew I was only 21. Or that this product, the one getting attention now for its seamless interface and eerie predictive capabilities, had started as a half-baked prototype I built alone in a Caltech dorm room between midterms. They just knew I was the founder, the one in the oversized hoodie who coded like a ghost at midnight and answered emails at 3 a.m. with full bug fixes. I raised my paper cup of cold brew. To the team, I said, but let's not breathe too easy, we scale now, this is just phase 1. Their excitement didn't dip, if anything it spiked. Jorge muttered, she's not kidding, is she? No, I wasn't. Later that night, when the others had cleared out and the hum of the coworking floor had faded into the mechanical purr of cleaning crews and forgotten monitors, I stayed behind. I stared at the user map lighting up with new activity. Singapore, Berlin, Austin, Boston, even someone in Nairobi. And all of them were using something I had built, something no one had believed I could do. Then came the email. Subject, impressive early traction, let's talk. I almost didn't open it. It looked like another press pitch or maybe someone fishing for a demo code. But the name caught my eye. Eli Torres, venture capitalist, Horizon Growth Fund. The message was short. Ava Linwood, came across your product today, clean UI, brilliant backend logic. 10,000 users in 6 days. That's no accident, we'd love to meet the face behind the code. Eli, I just stared at it for a second. Let it settle. Someone had noticed. Not because of Lee, not because of my last name, just me, my work, my mind. I didn't reply right away. I closed the email tab and sat back, letting the moment hit me in full. 3 years ago, I sat in my bedroom teaching myself loops and syntax while my family praised Lee for fetching lattes at a marketing internship. Now I was building something real, something big, and they still didn't know. I smiled to myself in the blue light of my screen. Let them keep posting about Lee's career. Let them keep assuming I'm just managing. I wasn't just building a product anymore. I was building an empire, quietly. But not for long. It started with a text from Lee. You still doing that coding thing? I stared at it for a second, amused by how 7 years of work and 2 full-stack platforms I'd built from scratch had been distilled into that coding thing. Still, curiosity won. I texted back. Yeah, why? She responded within seconds. My firm's hosting a tech mixer this Friday. All the big companies will be there. Meta, Oracle, couple VCs too. Could be a good place for you to meet people. Want me to put you on the guest list? I could almost hear the smile in her message, self-satisfied and clueless. She thought she was doing me a favor, introducing the awkward little sister to the real tech world she imagined she'd conquered with her polished LinkedIn profile and overpriced blazer collection. I replied, sure, thanks. And so, on a rainy Friday evening in downtown San Francisco, I zipped up my plain black dress, the only one I owned that wasn't function first, and headed into a scene that felt like another universe. The venue was a converted warehouse. Exposed beams, dramatic uplighting, giant neon logos pulsing above sleek cocktail bars, suits and sheath dresses everywhere, laughter that was just a little too loud. Tech bros spinning startup jargon like they were auditioning for Shark Tank. I arrived alone. No one recognized me, of course, which was perfect. I kept near the back, clutching a glass of something I didn't drink and observing like I was collecting user data, which honestly I kind of was. This wasn't my usual space, but it was fascinating watching the way these people moved, circling one another like sharks in suits. Lee found me near the snack bar. "There you are," she said, all bright lipstick and ambition. She hugged me with one arm while keeping her other hand on her wine glass like I might wrinkle her. "Glad you came, you clean up nice." I glanced down at my plain dress. "You invited me. I figured I should at least show up with shoes on." She laughed politely, already scanning the room behind me. "You never know who you'll meet here," she said, in that sweet, sugary tone that made my teeth hurt. "Maybe someone smart, finally." I turned to look at her. She didn't flinch, didn't even realize. Lee didn't know. She had no idea the app half these people used, one that recently got a shout-out on TechCrunch for disrupting productivity across teams, was mine. No clue that the guy she just waved at from Oracle had emailed me 3 days ago asking for an integration partnership. And definitely no inkling that her firm, the one hosting this flashy little mixer, was now part of a growing portfolio I'd started acquiring through a shell company under a quiet Delaware LLC. But sure, maybe I'd meet someone smart. I didn't correct her. Not yet. Instead, I smiled. "I'll keep an eye out," I said. She nodded approvingly, as if she was mentoring me. As if we weren't standing on two completely different floors of the same skyscraper, and she hadn't realized I built mine from the basement up. "Come on," she said, looping her arm through mine. "There's someone from HR I want you to meet. They're looking for junior devs, and I figured, you might want to get your foot in the door somewhere." I blinked once, twice, and followed her. Not because I needed the job, but because the game was getting interesting now. Lee was walking me through the mixer like a show dog, talking me up just enough to look generous but never too much to dim her own spotlight. I nodded, smiled, and said little, just enough to keep her talking. She introduced me to someone from recruiting, a guy who asked me without irony if I'd ever built anything real. "I tinker," I said, shrugging. He smiled like I was adorable. "Keep tinkering, you never know." I almost laughed. Because somewhere on this floor, someone had just gotten a Slack ping from my software, rolling out a new update I had personally pushed 3 hours earlier. By the time the DJ started mixing ambient electro beats into the hum of networking chatter, I was done. I slipped out quietly, unnoticed. And as I stood on the street outside, the city lights flickering in the puddles around me, I opened my inbox. Another new message. Another inquiry. Subject: interested in your roadmap. When's your next round? I smiled, then turned off my notifications. I had all the meetings I needed. What I didn't have was patience. But that was changing too, because when the reveal came, it wouldn't be loud. It would be surgical and unforgettable. The second time Lee introduced me to someone that night, it wasn't so much an introduction as it was a setup. I was standing near the snack bar again, trying to remain invisible, when she called out over the crowd with that high-gloss, too loud tone she used when she wanted people to know she was in charge of the conversation. "Oh, you guys haven't met my sister yet, have you?" 4 heads turned at once. A mix of laughter, wine glasses, and name tags. Mid-30s. All decked in sharp suits with lanyards and fast-tracked careers. Lee grabbed my wrist and pulled me into their circle before I could say anything. "This is Ava," she said, voice chipper. "My little sister, the cat lady who reads code for fun." There it was. She even added a little shrug like "what can you do?" and giggled. The group laughed lightly at first until one guy, tall and slick in a charcoal blazer, tilted his head and looked me up and down. "Wait, this is that sister?" he asked. "The one you said spends most of her time tinkering." Lee made a face like she was trying to soften the blow. "I didn't say most of her time. Just that she's more niche." "Niche," I smiled tightly. My fingers wrapped around the stem of my drink. Charcoal blazer leaned in slightly. "So Ava, what's it like being the family underachiever while Lee's actually out here earning?" The way he said "actually" hung in the air like the stench of an open trash can. Lee laughed. That soft, breathy kind of laugh that could easily be mistaken for humility if you didn't know her. I did. For a split second, I thought about walking away. Just turning on my heel and letting them keep believing the version of me Lee had been selling all night. But I didn't. I looked at Lee. Really looked at her. At the pride in her expression, the unspoken satisfaction. This was her spotlight, her story. She'd spent years making sure I stayed in the background, quiet, unassuming, manageable, and I let her. Until now. I took a small sip of my drink and smiled. Calm, almost casual. Pretty great, actually, I said, glancing at Charcoal Blazer. Especially when you own 56% of the company half the people in this room are trying to get a job with. The silence hit instantly. One of the women in the group actually coughed. Lee blinked once, twice. The guy laughed, awkward, unsure. Wait, what? I pulled my phone from my clutch and opened the homepage of my platform, the one now used by thousands of teams, startups, and agencies. I turned the screen toward them without a word. They recognized it immediately. Wait, this is yours. The woman asked, her tone now something between disbelief and apology. Lee's wine glass dipped in her hand. You're joking. Nope. I looked back at the group. Founder, lead developer, I wrote the first 40,000 lines of code in a Caltech dorm room. I held her gaze for the first time all evening. And Lee, I added, voice cool and even, did you know your firm licenses our team suite? That's why I recognized the layout when we walked in. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I always thought it was funny, I continued. How someone could brag about being a future tech leader while never noticing the software they're using every day was built by their own sister. The silence turned sharp. One by one, the group found excuses to drift. Charcoal Blazer muttered something about checking on a client. The woman smiled nervously and gave a quick congrats before stepping away. Lee and I were left standing alone. She still hadn't spoken. I didn't come here to embarrass you, I said finally. But if you're going to drag me into a circle to mock me, you should probably know what I do first. Her voice came at last, small and tight. You never said. You never asked. I didn't wait for her reply. I walked away, weaving through the mixer crowd with my shoulders back and my chin high, not because I needed their attention, but because I finally had no reason to shrink. That circle of people may not remember my name tomorrow. But Lee would. She would remember tonight. Because for the first time in our lives, I wasn't the one standing in her shadow. She was standing in mine. By morning, the mixer was a memory, but the shift inside me wasn't. I arrived early to the office. Too early, really. Most of the floor was still quiet except for the hum of the espresso machine in the kitchenette and the gentle tapping of our receptionist's keyboard echoing down the glass corridor. I stepped into my corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows casting long shadows across the dark hardwood, the skyline still waking up beyond the glass, and took a breath. My assistant, Clarice, entered with a clipboard and her usual calm expression. You have your 9 a.m. with legal and your 10:30 with investor relations. Want me to push either? No, I said, slipping out of my coat and folding it over the back of the couch. But I need to add something. I want an immediate audit of the Haverton Group. Clarice paused mid-scribble. Lee's firm. Formally, yes. Informally, it's one of our mid-tier holdings under Helix Bay. I walked to the window and looked out over the city. Something's been bothering me for a while. Last night confirmed it. What kind of audit? She asked gently. Full compliance. Vendor integrity, expense sheets, hiring practices. I want everything unfiltered. I turned back toward her. Start with the finance and HR departments. Clarice nodded once. I'll contact compliance now. She exited without another word. That's what I appreciated most about her, no judgment, just quiet execution. By 10 a.m., word had spread through the building. Not officially, but you could hear the current shifting, the increased foot traffic in the hallway, the muted whispers outside my door, the subtle looks exchanged between departments as the news settled in. Ava Linwood had called for a probe. Inside, I was calm, focused. This wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity. Lee's firm hadn't made my radar until last quarter. I'd greenlit its acquisition under one of my shell portfolios based on its surface-level financials and product pipeline. It was supposed to be routine, just another growing tech consultancy tucked inside a safe basket. But over the past few months, something had felt off. Sloppy vendor contracts. A spike in turnover. Budget surpluses evaporating without a clear trace. I hadn't looked closer because, truthfully, I hadn't wanted to mix business with family. Now, that boundary no longer served me. I stood behind my desk, scanning the preliminary documents already pulled into the internal portal. I recognized names from the mixer the night before, the ones laughing, the ones who assumed Lee's power was something earned. My chief compliance officer, Roman, stepped into the office carrying a tablet. Some early red flags, he said, holding it out. Unusual expense reimbursements and a string of contracts signed without proper review. Nothing we can't handle, but it's messy. Clean house, I said without looking up. He nodded. Quietly or loud? Start quietly, I replied, but be ready if it gets loud. As he left, I moved to the window again and stared out. There was no satisfaction in this, no smirk, no thrill. Just silence and the weight of finally acting on something I should have acted on sooner. This wasn't about Lee, not entirely, it was about standards. And every company tied to my name, even in shadow, was going to meet them. Let them talk, let the whispers swirl, let Lee wonder. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was protecting what I built. The knock on the glass was sharp, angry. Clarice barely had time to buzz a warning through the intercom before Lee stormed into the room, her heels clacking like gunshots across the polished floor. Her face was flushed, lips tight, eyes wild with disbelief. You, her voice cracked under the weight of rage. It's you. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't think you'd actually. She broke off, glancing around the office as if she couldn't believe where she was. As if the truth of the space, its clean, modern quiet, was somehow more offensive than the chaos she'd left behind. You own it, she whispered. All this time, I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her eyes flew back to mine, burning. You're trying to ruin me. She looked smaller than usual. Not just physically, something in her posture, in the way her voice wavered when it wasn't cloaked in public bravado. Like the scaffolding she'd spent years building her identity around had finally started to collapse. Lee, I said evenly, motioning for the door to close behind her. Sit. I'm not sitting, she barked. You're having my emails pulled, you're freezing vendor contracts, you flagged my team for misreporting. What kind of psychopath burns down her own sister's job? I'm not burning anything down, I replied, walking slowly around my desk to face her. I'm cleaning up. There are ethics violations across multiple departments. I gave the compliance team full authority to audit every level. If you've done your job by the book, you'll be fine. Her hands curled into fists. You waited until I was settled, until I built my team, earned my promotion, and now you want to sweep in and tear it all apart. No, I said calmly. I waited until I could no longer excuse the dysfunction just because my sister worked there. She stared at me, stunned for a breath, then scoffed. You've always hated that I outshined you. That made me laugh. Outshined me. I said, the edge in my voice finally surfacing. Lee, you didn't even realize you were using my software until I told you at a party. You humiliated me, she hissed. In front of everyone. No, I said, stepping closer. You humiliated yourself, I just stopped making it easy for you. We stood in silence for a long moment, two women with the same last name, same blood, but nothing else tying them together anymore. You've changed, she whispered. I nodded. No, I stopped pretending. She turned abruptly and left without another word, her heels echoing down the corridor, this time uncertain, faltering. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. Dad, I knew it was coming. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. The fourth time I picked up. What are you doing? His voice was tight with fury and thinly veiled panic. Do you know how this looks? Your sister is devastated. You're putting the entire company's reputation at risk. No, I said quietly. The company put itself at risk when it allowed unethical practices to flourish. I'm the one cleaning it up. This isn't how family works, he said bitterly. You don't just turn on your own people because of some grudge, you'll destroy everyone's chances. I stood by the window again, watching the streets below fill with evening traffic, my reflection faint in the glass. You destroyed mine a long time ago, I said. I'm just making sure no one else gets buried under what you chose to ignore. He was quiet on the other end, and for once I didn't fill the silence, I let him sit in it. I'm disappointed in you, Ava, I smiled faintly. You've been disappointed in the wrong daughter for years. I ended the call. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. Not to Lee, not to him, not anymore. The boardroom was colder than usual, not in temperature but in tone. Too clean, too quiet. The kind of silence that fills a room when people realize the person they've ignored is the one holding the keys. Mr. Lane, the CEO of Haverton Group, sat at the end of the long table, hands folded, eyebrows furrowed in cautious confusion. He didn't know why he'd been summoned, only that it was urgent. I sat across from him, posture straight, folder unopened in front of me. He still didn't recognize me. We'd passed each other once or twice, at acquisition briefings, investor mixers. I'd always let the legal team take point, hidden behind the LLCs and shell partners that kept me off the masthead. Today I wasn't hiding. "Thank you for coming," I began, tone even. "I won't take much of your time." Lane forced a smile. "Of course, anything we can do to support, well, whoever you're representing." I opened the folder and slid a single page toward him, company letterhead stamped across the top. A declaration of majority ownership, signed and dated. My name bold and unmistakable. He went pale. "Yes," I said. "I'm not representing anyone. I own 56% of Haverton Group. Technically, I've had controlling interest for 3 months, legally, quietly." He stared at the paper like it might explode. But why now? Why reveal that?" I folded my hands. "Because I've been watching and I've seen enough." His brow tightened. "Look, if this is about the audit." "It's exactly about the audit." I leaned forward, voice steady but unmistakably firm. "You've tolerated unethical practices long enough. Ghost vendors, inflated expense reports, misclassified roles, and a culture that protects loud, arrogant managers while burying talented developers under impossible deadlines." Lane blinked, mouth opening then closing. "This isn't personal," I added. "Not even about Lee, it's structural. You've run this company like a club, not a business. That ends now." He swallowed hard. "What do you want?" "A new board," I said simply. "With an independent ethics officer, quarterly compliance reports, and real accountability. I'll nominate candidates by next week. And if I refuse," I tilted my head slightly, "then I call a vote, and given my ownership stake, you already know the outcome." He looked down, breathing hard through his nose. "You planned this." I didn't answer. He already knew. After a long pause, he gave a slow, reluctant nod. "Understood." I stood, gathering the untouched folder. "You'll get the board slate by Monday." As I reached the door, he spoke again, quieter this time. "You're young." I turned back. "And you've been warned more than once." He didn't reply. Outside the boardroom, one of the senior developers, Natalie, was waiting by the elevator. She must have heard whispers of what happened, but her expression wasn't fear, it was hope. "You really just pulled rank in there?" she asked. I shrugged. "Time for a change." She gave a slow, tired smile. "People like you should have been leading from the beginning." The elevator dinged. I stepped in, nodded once, and let the doors close behind me. I didn't need applause, I didn't need headlines. What I needed was order, and now I had it. The conference room was packed. Long table, 12 chairs, 2 screens glowing with the company logo, bottles of still water neatly lined up like soldiers. Most of the executive board had arrived early, murmuring in cautious tones, shooting glances toward the door toward me. Word had spread, not publicly but enough. Ava Linwood wasn't just the quiet investor anymore. She was in control. I walked in 5 minutes early, Clarice beside me with the printed agenda and a sealed folder. Every seat fell silent the moment my heels touched the tile. Lee was already there. Second chair from the left. Dressed sharp, lips painted, face unreadable except for the way she refused to meet my eyes. Across from her sat Dean Arlo, the smug project lead from the mixer. He'd laughed the hardest when she called me the cat lady who reads code for fun. He wasn't laughing now. "Thank you all for coming," I said, sliding into the head chair. "Let's begin." Clarice distributed the packets while I clicked the remote, bringing the first page of the internal review onto the screen. "Over the past 3 weeks," I began, "we've conducted a full compliance and performance audit across all major departments." A flicker of movement. Lee stiffened. I continued, unfazed. "This review revealed 2 primary concerns. 1. A pattern of unapproved expenditures and misrepresented results within Project Dextra. 2. A breach of conduct within internal communications and hiring referrals, specifically related to Dean Arlo's management practices." Dean straightened in his seat, his voice tight. "Are you implying misconduct?" "No," I said, "I'm confirming it." A few heads turned. Someone gasped. I didn't flinch. "Effective immediately," I continued, "Dean Arlo's contract is terminated for cause. You'll be escorted out after this meeting. Legal has your files." He rose halfway. "You can't." "I can," I interrupted. "And I just did." Silence. Then Lee stood. Not slowly. Not quietly. She stood like someone who'd just been yanked out of a dream they didn't want to wake up from. "You can't do this to me." Her voice echoed in the stunned stillness of the room. "I built that department," she went on, cheeks flushing. I worked my way up. Everyone here knows it. You, she pointed at me. You've just been hiding behind shell companies and shadow shares. You don't even know what it's like to actually work for something. I looked at her finally. I stood, matching her height, matching her fire, but not her volume. This isn't about punishment, Lee, I said, voice cool and steady. It's about standards, and you don't meet them. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. You think this is fair, she whispered, to do this in front of everyone? No, I said, I think it's overdue. She looked around the table, desperate for a lifeline, but no one spoke. No one moved, not because they feared me, because they knew I wasn't wrong. You wanted to lead, I said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. But leadership isn't about status. It's not about having the loudest voice or getting credit at mixers. It's about accountability. You abused your position, Lee. I gave you a chance. You used it to build a throne for yourself and forget the people under you. Her mouth opened, then closed. I turned to the others. Effective immediately, Lee Linwood is relieved of her current title. She may remain on contract during the transition period. That is all. The air in the room felt split in two. The old hierarchy shattered, and in its place me, not loud, not angry, just resolute. Lee sank back into her chair, silent. Dean sat stiffly, eyes forward, waiting for someone to escort him out. No one dared speak until I gave the signal. Meeting adjourned. I gathered my notes, nodded to Clarice, and walked out without a backward glance. Let the silence speak now. It said everything that needed to be said. 2 days after the boardroom shook itself awake, my inbox pinged with a message I didn't expect. Subject, thank you. The email was short, barely 4 lines, but I read it twice. Ms. Linwood, I just wanted to say thank you. I was going to quit. I couldn't take how people like Dean talked down to us, how your sister ignored complaints. But then I saw you stand up to them. I'm staying now. And I'll work harder because of you. Sienna, junior developer. I stared at the screen, one hand still hovering over my coffee, and felt something shift inside me. Not pride, not triumph, something deeper. For the first time, someone saw me not for what I was proving, but for what I was protecting. I typed back quickly, keep building, I've got your back. Ava. I hit send, sat back, and let myself exhale. Maybe the silence I carried all these years. The silence in that high school hallway, in the bedroom where I taught myself code under a blanket, wasn't just for me. Maybe I was holding it long enough to break it at the right time for the right people. I didn't hear the knock, just the creak of my office door. Lee. She stood in the doorway like someone unsure whether they were welcome or just tolerated. Her mascara was smudged, eyeliner faded, hair still curled but losing its sharpness around the edges. She tired, and not just tired in the bad night's sleep way, tired like something inside her had cracked and she wasn't sure what would pour out. Do you have a minute? She asked softly. I gave a small nod, motioning for her to come in. She didn't sit, just stood by the window, staring at the skyline like it might offer her an answer. I was wrong, she said, voice low. About everything. I said nothing, let the words hang. I spent years thinking I had to compete with you, win, stay ahead. I didn't even realize you weren't even racing me, you were just building something else entirely. I folded my hands together on the desk. You weaponized the fact that I was invisible, and when you finally saw me you tried to shrink me again. She flinched. I know, and I deserved what happened in that room. Silence. Then she turned to face me fully. I don't want a title or sympathy, but I do want to be different. Her voice cracked on the last word, and I saw her eyes shimmer. Not for show, not for drama, real. I don't know how to fix it, she whispered, but I want to try. I studied her, this sister who once reduced me to punchlines and shadows, now standing across from me without armor. Old me might have wanted her gone, fired, forgot, but power wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about choices, and I was finally free to make mine without needing anyone's approval. You have one chance, I said calmly. Not to prove anything to me but to yourself. Blinked, holding back tears. You mean you're not letting me go? No, I said, standing. I'm letting you rebuild. Her breath hitched. But I'll be watching, closely, and this time there are standards, no shortcuts, no excuses. She nodded quickly, grateful, maybe even a little stunned. I'll start from the ground if I have to. I gave a faint smile. Good, that's where the real builders begin. She stepped toward the door, then paused. Ava, I looked up. I'm sorry I didn't believe in you sooner. I didn't reply, I just let her leave, because some things don't need words. As the door shut behind her, I sat back down and opened my laptop again. This time, when the next message came in from the legal team about our expansion market, I smiled. Because the company was growing, the culture was shifting, and maybe, just maybe, so were we. By winter, the office felt different. The tension that once lived in the corners, in every whispered hallway conversation, every side glance at who was included and who wasn't had thinned out, like a wound finally breathing. It didn't happen overnight, but I noticed the little things first. The way Lee started arriving early, always the second person in after Clarice, coffee in one hand, notebook already open. She no longer swept through the office with heels that dared someone to look. Now she walked quietly, nodded to the front desk staff, made copies herself. She stopped delegating things that weren't hers to delegate. And most of all, she stopped performing. No more loud phone calls about closing deals. No more lunchtime bragging. No more tight-lipped smiles masking condescension. Instead, she asked questions, listened, stayed behind to help with onboarding when HR was overwhelmed. She even declined a private office when one opened up. "I work better out here," she'd said. "And it's harder to ignore people when you sit among them." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but that made it real. I watched from a distance. I didn't hover, I didn't test her. I didn't need to, I just paid attention. One afternoon, I passed by the open workspace and saw her leaning over Sienna's desk, the same junior dev who'd emailed me months ago, quietly reviewing a presentation deck. She didn't talk over her. Didn't take over. She just offered suggestions, then let Sienna lead the rest. Later that day, I walked back into my office where Clarice waited with the week's briefing folder. As she handed it over, she glanced toward the glass wall where Lee still sat, scribbling on a whiteboard with a small team gathered around her. "She's different now," Clarice said without prompting. I nodded, flipping through the briefing pages. "Some people learn, some don't." Clarice raised an eyebrow. "And her?" I looked up and considered it honestly. "She might." The words surprised even me, but I meant them. As for the company, it was growing. The culture was shifting, finally reflecting the product we built, open, functional, ethical. The kind of place I would have wanted to intern at all those years ago. We just expanded into 2 new markets. Europe was next. HR implemented a peer review system. Managers were now evaluated as rigorously as their teams. And the gossip, the fear, the quiet resentments, fading. What replaced it was slower. Less flashy, but real, respect, mutual investment. No one raised their voice in meetings anymore to dominate. They raised their voices to support. We weren't perfect, but we were better. And in the background, without applause or shortcuts, Lee was slowly becoming someone I might have respected even if we didn't share a last name. It didn't erase what came before, but it gave me hope for what might come next. The stage lights were warm against my face, and for once I didn't mind the spotlight. I stood at the center of a packed tech leadership conference. Clean podium, cameras discreetly set up along the aisles, murmurs quieting as I stepped up to speak. Rows of faces stared back at me. Students, founders, developers, executives. People at the start, middle, or pivot of their journeys. I took a breath, then began. "My name is Ava Linwood," I said clearly, "and I build things people once told me I wasn't qualified to touch." The audience chuckled softly. Not because it was funny, but because they understood. I scanned the front row. My parents were there, Dad, stone-faced, jaw tight. Mom, hands folded in her lap, eyes following my every move like she was seeing me for the first time. And next to them, Lee. Hair pinned back. Subtle suit, not a trace of smugness. Just calm attention, and when I met her gaze for a beat, a small, steady smile. She was the first to clap when I began, and I didn't miss it. I was 17 when someone told me in front of a full school hallway that I'd just have to manage while others had real potential. I continued. That moment didn't break me, but it marked me, and I used it. A pause, a heartbeat, the truth hanging there like a banner behind my words. "See, the people who underestimate you," I said. "They will teach you how to rise." A few in the audience nodded. One woman near the aisle blinked fast, holding something back. I wasn't the loudest voice in the room. I wasn't the top of my class, and I didn't get offers handed to me, but I invested in myself. I studied in silence, and when I built something worth seeing, people noticed. Another pause, the kind that holds weight. "But this isn't a story about revenge," I added. "It's about standards." I glanced at the screen behind me where a slide showed our company's new values. Integrity, collaboration, growth. Because no matter where you come from, no matter what they call you, if you want to lead, it starts with what you're willing to walk away from, and what you're willing to stand for. The room held its breath, I let it. And in this company, I said finally, we don't mock, we mentor. The applause started slowly, then swelled. Hands clapping, feet tapping, a few whistles from the back. I saw my mother lower her gaze, a subtle shimmer in her eyes. My father didn't clap right away. But Lee did. She stood, straight-backed, eyes glassy, expression unreadable except for the pride in it. Afterward, people swarmed the lobby to shake hands, snap photos, share stories of their own. But my mind stayed on that row. On the girl I used to be. On the silence I carried like armor. And the voice I had finally claimed as mine. That was the end of my story. The moment I stopped managing and started leading, not just a company, but my own life. And sometimes I still wonder, did Lee do the right thing by swallowing her pride, starting over from the bottom, and choosing to rebuild instead of walking away? Have you ever done something similar when you realized you were wrong, and did it change you? Tell me in the comments what you think. And if this story meant something to you, don't forget to like and subscribe so I can share more journeys like mine with you.